So last night, I saw the movie Him, directed by Justin Tipping, but heavily marketed as a Jordan Peele production. So, you know what that means. It means the movie's gonna be full of double meanings, hidden symbols, social commentary, and cultural history all throughout the story for us to discuss for weeks. And I've done plenty of research on this film and this emerging filmmaker. So, as I usually do, I want to break this movie down from the very beginning all the way to the very end. So to break this movie down, we're going to use three themes. One, soldiers from sons, where we'll discuss Cameron's childhood, Cameron's father's death, the military's influence on football, and the meaning of the title of the film. Two, Legend of the Mascot, where we'll discuss Cameron's head slash, the symbolism of the fans and mascots, the fan attacks on Cameron, Isaiah's monologue about the Carlisle Indians, and the artifacts all around Isaiah's home. And three, Price of Greatness, where we'll discuss the 7-day chapters, Isaiah's philosophy, Isaiah's training methods, the football family God quote, the training doctor, the blood transfers and injections, Elsie and her strippers, and the ending with the ritual party, the ritual fight, and the ritual contract signing ceremony, and so much more. Hope you enjoy. Theme number one, soldiers from sons. The film starts with our main character, Cameron Cade, as a child. And we learn from this intro that Cam was brought up into the sport of football by his father, Cameron Cade Sr., a massive fan of the American football team, the Saviors, and their 8-time champion, greatest of all time quarterback, Isaiah White. And as Cam continues to talk about his father throughout the film, we learn that Cam Sr. had quite a forceful, intense, tough love parenting and coaching style with his son. In one case, we hear and see that he repeatedly makes his son Cam rewatch the footage of Isaiah's brutal injury that he gets in the finals where his bone is poking through the skin, where Cam Sr. simply claims that that's what true dedication looks like. And this opening scene establishes this theme of conditioning our child to fulfill an image of success in our eyes as parents. And obviously, there are times where it's a beautiful thing to pass your passions down to your kids. But in Cam Sr.'s case, it's taken to an inappropriate level, an extreme level, with a distorted idea of strength and masculinity. And we learn much later in the film that Cam admitted to his father he was falling out of love with the sport, but his father's disappointment haunted him, especially since those were his last words between him and his father before his father passed away. So in Cam's own personal form of denial and coping, he continued to tirelessly dedicate himself to the sport. It's this form of parent-to-child conditioning that the child feels is nearly impossible to escape, because we, since childhood, are nearly programmed to earn our parents' approval, even as we grow older as adults. And in an image we briefly see of Cam's father in one of those US Army memorial cards, we learn Cam's father passed away serving in the military. And this touches on a really big historical theme with football and the military, and further emphasizes this tough love father-son relationship between Cam Jr. and Cam Sr. So I want to use a quote from the writer-director Justin Tipping to introduce this big thematic tie-in. I'd known about the beginnings of the sport being tied to military and Civil War vets coming back and thinking their sons weren't masculine enough and using war tactics to create this game. So what Justin is saying here is completely right. After the American Civil War, many veterans and educators worried that the next generation of young men were soft because they hadn't been tested in war like their parents. So these rough, intense, highly physical contact sports were encouraged to toughen the boys up and build discipline. And American football specifically fit that cultural need for male American youth perfectly. This is why we still have military-related terms in football culture and strategy: line of scrimmage, trenches, flanking, blitz. It all originates from this post-Civil War definition of masculinity for these boys that these men were raising. And it all ties in thematically with how fathers raised their sons to be, and how we culturally determine what the ideal form of a man is. Hence the title of the film, Him, in all caps. And there are many more meanings this title represents through other themes in the movie. So let's explore these other ideas as we move into theme number 2, Legend of the Mascot. So there's a bit of a turning point early on in the film where Cam runs into a sudden setback. He's just finishing up a night of training when mysteriously a ball is seen spinning on his tip. And when Cam goes to check it out, he is suddenly slashed in the head by a mysterious mascot. And you might be wondering why it's never mentioned by the press or his family or himself that he was just attacked. It's addressed as if it just happened in training or in a game. And that's because this scene with the attack is the first overtly symbolic moment in the film. The synopsis of the movie claims that it was a crazed fan that attacked him, but it holds so much more of a symbolic purpose. The mascots and crazed fans throughout this entire film are seen as antagonists and demons for Cameron to overcome on his journey to greatness. In countless instances, the fans and mascots are haunting Cam or hurting Cam or pulling him away from his goals in various ways. And every time they attack him, the film makes it purposely unclear whether it truly happened or not. This is because the concept of the mascot symbolically represents the antithesis, the opposite, the enemy of what Cam is destined to become, the champion. In various ways, Isaiah continuously tells Cam, don't be a mascot. The mascot, or the fan, are a figure of insignificance among the crowd of many supporters for the truly significant individual, the champion. So when Cameron's head is slashed by the mascot, it doesn't literally mean he was attacked by a fan. It's more so this supernatural, thematic, spiritual pull, pulling him away from his life stream, which he knows he isn't meant for because, as we know, he's fallen out of love with the sport. So overall, I think it's more appropriate to interpret this head injury as a training incident or a gameplay collision, which is a common cause for that particular injury in this sport, a concussion. The attack of the mascot is only meant to symbolize what injuries, setbacks, and failure mean to Cameron. The fear of fading into obscurity among the general crowd of supporters and failing to fulfill his father's expectations. There's also a massive historical element with these mascots that I have to dive into because it plays a significant role in how we interpret the men in suits at the very end of the film. So when Cameron finally arrives at Isaiah's compound and meets him for the first time, Isaiah tells him a story about an indigenous college football team from the late 1800s who defeated prestigious white schools but were eventually forgotten through history and relegated to mascots culturally. And I want to expand on this because this is completely true historically. So between 1893 and 1917, a college football team was formed out of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania in an effort to further assimilate Native American children into white American society, often sadly stripping them of their language, traditions, and culture. As Isaiah mentions, the Carlisle boys were undersized, but they honed in on clever strategic plays to outsmart their bigger, stronger opponents at the prestigious white schools. Their approach to football gave rise to many trick plays that are now common in the modern game, such as their introduction of the spiral pass and the handoff fake. The team drew national attention because they were indigenous players beating the biggest, whitest, most prestigious colleges such as Harvard and Yale. And their victories disrupted the stereotypes that indigenous people were primitive or inferior. However, presumably in an effort to prevent Carlisle's continued success and domination, the league eventually determined many of their plays illegal. And sadly, the rules of the NCAA today largely stem from those decisions rooted in discrimination in the early 1900s. As Justin says, the Carlisle Indian boys were undersized and they had to come up with creative ways to beat the boys at Yale. And it pissed everyone off so much that there were no rule books, and the NCAA's rules all come from the same place. And in 1917, Carlisle folded with their final year of football. So in the future, professional and college teams adopted these Indian mascots, sometimes claiming to honor the great Native American players who evolved the game, but often relying on caricatures and stereotypes like feathers, war whoops, tomahawks, and red skin, leaving the true legacy of indigenous football champions largely forgotten. And overall, this is what Isaiah is talking about in his monologue about the Carlisle Indians, and it emphasizes not to be forgotten like them, not to become a mascot. You can also see with the countless artifacts and imagery throughout his house, he uses the philosophy and traditions of tribes across various cultures to define his meaning of domination, success, and survival, often comparing the instinct and bloodthirst of a reigning warrior and army to that of a reigning champion and championship-winning team. Of course, also mixed in with classic occultist masks, animal heads, and symbols to represent the irreversible sacrifices he made in exchange for his success. The reference to the history also highlights the commodification of these rising athletes by these higher-ups who run these leagues like the NCAA, which is pretty well documented in documentaries like HBO's Student Athlete and Vice's Schooled. And this is really where the horror stems from, as Justin expands here. It felt like this film, in terms of taking on institution and systemic haunting of people that are just going to use you for profit and move you through like a commodity, I would be remiss not to include those voices and that perspective, because that's where it was coming from. He's telling them, don't be a mascot, but also within a paradigm and structure that is inescapable. And as Justin warns us, when Cam and Isaiah collide, this is where the movie really starts to intensify. Theme number 3, price of greatness. So Cam's visit to Isaiah's compound is scheduled for a week. So from this point on, the film is divided into 7 chapters, each individually representing each of the 7 days of that week. And this 7-day series essentially represents Cam's journey to greatness, with each day representing a specific requirement or component to that success and greatness. And as you can imagine, each step gets more and more intense, demanding, and costly. Day 1 is titled Fun, where Cam and Isaiah do some basic training to loosen up and capture his current measurements and stats. When Cam mentions how he uses his family to motivate him towards his biggest goals, Isaiah adds that he needs to think of them when he feels he's reached his limit. However, he also adds that they can't be his greatest motivator. There needs to be a deeper, more personal thirst for greatness that allows him to deprioritize his family when they may become somewhat of a distraction. And this is our introduction to Isaiah's twisted idea of success and the sacrifices required for it. And Cam becomes more and more familiar with that philosophy as the week continues. Day 2 is Poise, where we turn up the heat a little bit. A training teammate of Cam's is hit in the face with a ball launcher at extremely high speeds every time Cam's pass is unsuccessful. The purpose of this twisted exercise is for Cam to maintain his composure under extreme pressure and acknowledge the accountability that rests on his shoulders as the quarterback. In the aftermath, the injured player is only grateful he got to be a part of the exercise as he worships Isaiah in his legendary status. And this theme of athlete worship is massively prevalent in the film, where in our world, professional athletes are often worshipped by fans, media, and aspiring athletes as if they're gods amongst men. We use terms like king, god and goddess, hand of God, and the greatest, just to name a few. And this ties in nicely with Isaiah's reversal of the phrase God, family, football to football, family, God, which ties in with his obsessive dedication to the sport, his deprioritization of family, and his independence from any god that may exist beyond him. Day 3 is leadership, where the other players are instructed by Isaiah to hit Cam as hard as they can despite his recent injury. The lesson here for Cam is essentially kill or be killed. Tap into that primal instinct, dominating the opposition by any means necessary as if it's a matter of survival. And Cam is an ancient warrior leading his army. And when we see Cam reach this point psychologically, severely injuring his training opponent, Isaiah congratulates him. We also get a moment where the trainer doctor discusses with him how he gave up everything to be there as well. He's lost touch with his family and the outside world for this career. And I think this is a subtle touch on the fact that these themes don't solely apply to the athlete's journey. These concepts of parental pressure, fate for greatness, and method of sacrifice exist across all careers and can break people all across society who we think to be successful. Day 4 is resilience, where we're in the sauna with Cam and Isaiah encourages Cam to carve his own path. When Cam asks what that means, Isaiah hits him with a dilemma. If you're starving in a prison, and you're offered either food or freedom, do you really have a choice? This speaks to Isaiah's feelings of imprisonment within his own success. Having sacrificed all he has, he is now trapped in this cycle of chasing the next victory, protecting his legacy, and maintaining the spotlight. There's essentially no choice for freedom. He's forgotten every other way of living. Day 5 is vision, and fittingly has to do with maintaining focus. First thing in the morning, Isaiah encourages Cam to let go of his girlfriend at home and accept his temptations toward infidelity. Such a lifestyle would keep women at the perfect distance. not close enough emotionally to be a distraction, but still close enough physically to be a continuous motivation and a symbol of status and success. This type of relationship is largely symbolized by Elsie White and her crew of strippers. Elsie is Isaiah's wife, but there's a constant physical and emotional distance between the two of them, which demonstrates this exact kind of romantic relationship Isaiah is describing. Continuing this theme of vision, Cam and Isaiah head out to the desert to shoot some targets, where together they finally address the subject of Cam succeeding Isaiah and his legacy, dethroning him as the new star in the spotlight. And this, of course, is an inevitable reality for every reigning champion to one day face. And this face-off between the rookie and the veteran is soon to be represented in their final encounter, which leads us to day 6, Sacrifice. Isaiah, Cam, and Elsie prepare for this photo shoot as if they're setting up for some kind of ritual. The imagery is lavish, expensive, and nearly portrays them as godlike figures like we spoke about before. Most notably, the image that replicates the Last Supper with Cam portraying Jesus. Eventually, Cam and Elsie head to a party, which only takes this cult-like energy and atmosphere even further. And here we see Cam finally give in to his greatest vices and temptations with naked women, expensive jewelry, and drinking as if he's taking on the final step of becoming the new Isaiah White. We later see him become disoriented, vomiting these gold chains and diamonds, seeming to signify that this lifestyle is both euphoric and sickeningly self-destructive. And so, since this late night party kind of blends into the morning of day 7, we don't get a title for day 7. And more importantly, because this is the day that Cam breaks free from the path of Isaiah White. If I were to title it, I would call it Liberty, because Cam is reclaiming his self-control, his agency, and his freedom. And we clearly see that this life of triumph and fame and riches isn't really worth it, as we see Isaiah sitting alone completely, reflecting on the crowd that cheers him on. They discuss the Isaiah White blood transfusions and injections and how they maximize performance and how these substances have passed down through generations to achieve and maintain greatness. Of course, being a commentary on steroid and performance-enhancing drug use throughout history. And this final fight is of course symbolic of the rising star succeeding the fading legend. And when Cam is about to defeat Isaiah, he asks him, "What's the opposite of a savior?" And Isaiah replies, "A killer." And Cam corrects him with the answer, "No, a mascot." Which means that Cam and Isaiah have now become opposites of one another. Cam is open to embracing the possibility of obscurity, the life of the mascot, where he can enjoy the company of his family and steer clear from his greatest vices. He's also highlighting how Isaiah is in many ways another version of a mascot, a darker, more devastating version. Isaiah has signed his life away to a lonely, self-destructive career, putting value in nothing but success, making him nothing more than a puppet under the executives who profit off of him. And that point moves us smoothly into the next sequence of the film, where Cam walks through the tunnel and he encounters in broad daylight the executives, the cheerleaders, and Elsie as well, at this final stage of his journey. So he has to sign his life away like Isaiah did and become the next legend like Isaiah was. But of course, Cam refuses, killing the league and franchise executives who were impatiently waiting for his cooperation and obedience. And if you ask me, I can't help but feel like the suicidal death of Elsie was symbolic. Because the type of woman she represents will willingly disappear when the rising star refuses that lifestyle and those desires. A woman like Elsie isn't something Cam has to refuse. She either comes along with or goes away with that lavish lifestyle of temptation. But in the end, in a violent final moment of rebellion, Cam reclaims his agency, autonomy, and freedom, unshackled from the brutal demands of legacy. Alright, that's my analysis. I can't wait to discuss your ideas, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.